Hi, and welcome back to BizDev Weekly, the business development show. I'm Kersten Kloss. Today, we're going to be talking about content, more importantly, the written word. And our special guest today is Graham Sandlin. And now, he is an independent author and copywriter that specializes in providing individuals and companies with the relevant content to help boost their sales and marketing efforts. His primary base of operations is over on the Pomelo website, www.pomelo.com. So what we basically did was we hired him to cut up all of our interviews and create articles about the video interviews. And all of this, the intent here was to syndicate out the written word about the videos that we had been creating with our author interviews. And when I found Graham, I found his writing to be incredibly intuitive. It was very expressionary. He had a lot of expansion on topics that he was offering us for our show, and it was an excellent addition to the team to have Graham with us. So, Graham, I just wanted to thank you for all the work you've done for us. It's been great.
Well, I appreciate all the kind words. You're going to make my head explode. But one of the things that you always have to do as a writer is you have to write what you know. And so many times what we're talking about when it comes with content or with sales, we're trying to sell or market something instead of actually just writing what we know about it.
Mm. Well, it's great. Now, I'm going to pick your brain today because you've done a lot of articles for a lot of different companies. You've worked in many aspects of business. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is maybe ask you a little bit of information about the targeted visitors. How important is the content to a company provides to their target audience?
Sure, mate. When you're talking about the actual content that we put out there, it tends to take a back door to everything else that we're trying to do when it comes to creating a website. We focus on building the website and marketing our website and getting word out about what we're trying to offer to the community at large. But when it comes down to the actual content, we focus less on trying to build a relationship with the customer and more about just trying to sell the item or product or concept that we're trying to get out there. And so when it comes to writing what we know, the content tends to get forgotten because we think about either spinning the content or using spin tacks or some of the other kind of common tools that you see a lot of websites use these days. When ultimately that might work for some, but to get more customers, having original content that has a writer writing what they know about it so that you can really convey the good information that a customer needs to make their decision about the product, that's what's missing.
Now, when you're writing content for a website, of course, you're trying to convert. You're trying to take visitors and convince them to take a step forward. And the industry standard conversion rate of taking a website visitor and getting something from them, either an email address or a sale, is approximately 2%. So, in your opinion, why should 2% be a standard? And is this actually aiming low? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really think that it's setting the bar low, because when you think about a 2% conversion rate, you're really only getting 2 out of 100 people actually wanting your product or service. And the problem with being satisfied with that is that all 100 people have come to your website actually thinking about buying your product or service or idea. And so, if you have a 98% fail rate, you ultimately are going to lose a lot of business to your competitors because they're going to find that their product or service is a lot better than what your product or service is having to offer. And it all boils down to the content that you're putting out there for the customers to look at and to see. You've put in all this hard work to get all those customers coming to your website. They want to be there because they're your targeted visitors. But 98 out of every 101 of those visitors is leaving at a 2% conversion rate, and that's just money that's coming out of your pocket. So for me, I'd rather set the bar much higher and flip it on its head. I'd rather see 98% of people come into my website and be interested and come back. Not necessarily maybe buy, but at least come back and be converted into a customer at a later time, rather than having a 2% success rate and then having 80% of them just bounce away and never come back to my website again.
Yeah, and it's that trust building tool, and it's also capturing their attention immediately. So it's part of the style of the writing. I guess it's also what to highlight first, different tactics like that that draw people in and into a compelling piece of writing, obviously that makes them dig deeper. Now, different people absorb information or take information in different ways. Some people just don't read. Some people just look at videos or look at pictures or they need illustrations. But a lot of people and a lot of search engines look at the written word and examine the written word very closely. So your point well taken. So can a sales pitch actually hold value for someone that's actually reading it, though? Can you explain on that a little bit?
That's a great question, mate. What you're talking about in a sales pitch is ultimately your attempt to get the customer to buy what you've got. And so, what we tend to focus on when we're trying to sell is to actually meet what our needs happen to be. We're looking at trying to build our revenue streams. We're trying to bring in new customers. And we're not actually thinking about what the customer's needs happen to be. The customer, that targeted visitor, isn't going to become a customer unless they feel like they have a relationship with your company. And the only way to really start fostering that relationship is within that sales pitch that you've created, which is what the customer, that targeted visitor you want to become a customer, is going to read. They're not going to see all the efforts that you've put in on the background, putting in backlinks that are valid and usable, or putting in keywords in strategic places, or using your metas, or anything else that you use to market your website and get it promoted. Those targeted visitors aren't going to see all that work. What they're going to see is the words that you've put in there to convince them to become a customer of yours. And so if you can relate to that person and you can start to establish a relationship with them so that they feel like they can trust you and trust what your product is or service is or concept is, and be able to buy into what you've got, well, then they're going to feel like you're buying into them, and that's what's going to create a sale. And that's why a 2% conversion rate is such a low bar to set, because if you're building into a relationship and you're building into customers, then customers are going to want to do business with you, because it's the nature of people to want to do business and be loyal to people with whom they have relationships. You don't generally do a lot of business with the guy who comes to your door at dinner trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner or something, but you do business with that person if you know that they're somebody's son that's down the street, or they're a neighbor that you've talked with for the last 10 years. And so the relationship really becomes key and important, whether it's doing business person to person or even doing business on the internet today, like we are doing more and more of.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, because it's so true. You made a couple points, and that was keywords and the use of keywords. And a lot of people, they slap up information on their websites, and they're only thinking, how am I going to get the search engines to find my information? So they structure it in such a way where there's repetition of certain keywords, and a lot of times that actually turns a content into almost an unreadable piece. And obviously you don't get much conversion when people look at it and go, what is this idiotic drivel? And essentially what you're saying is it's got to be created and structured properly. It's got to tell a story. People have to understand, know, like, and trust the content writer, as well as being optimized for findability online and properly structured so that the search engines index it properly.
You've hit the nail right on the head, man. What you're talking about when it comes to content, we tend to get lazy sometimes with content. I can't tell you how many times I get orders from people where all they want to do is to have me put in spin tags or put in, some different ways so we can use the same information, hundreds of different ways, so that there's no actual original content. It's just the same article said thousands of different times. And when we're talking about customers, well, your customer isn't stupid. Your customer is going to know exactly what is going on, because before they've even come to your website, they're going to have researched you, and they're going to know whether or not they want your product, and they're there because they want what you have to offer. 97% of people today use the internet to look up information about businesses above and beyond what the phone book is. And so that means people more and more these days are using the internet to check up on you and make sure that you really are trustworthy, and that you have exactly what you say you have. And so if you're not treating your customer with the respect that they deserve when it comes to providing them original content, they're going to know it and they're going to be able to read it. And let's be honest, when we're using Spintax, it just doesn't read right because there's always something that just doesn't really work. But when it comes to original content, not only do you have the ability to have a content writer, a copywriter, be able to convey that story, like you said, but you're also able to invade trust. And it comes from a natural point of view. Writers write what they know. And so, what I say and what I talk about is also what, as a writer, I write about. And so if I establish a relationship person to person, it's going to be the same kind of relationship I established person to person, but through the internet and through a sales copy.
So somewhat conversational in style. You know what? That's great stuff. And let's lead into the next question. What's a common error that businesses make when they're creating content and online? What do you see out there that's a big blunder?
And I can even point to an order that I received today where I was asked to create an email marketing campaign, and the email marketing campaign was several emails. They were all based on what the sales pitch was supposed to be, but structured in different ways so that you attack the sales copy from a different direction in the hopes that maybe somebody might find it interesting or relational or something like that. And what customers want these days isn't to be sold a bill of goods. What customers want from you is value. If you provide them more value, then they're going to become a customer of yours, period. End of discussion, because they want to know what it is that you have to offer that's above and beyond what anybody else, whatever your competition is, has to offer. And so, using the example of the email marketing campaigns, that's a perfect example of being able to provide your customers more value that's free, that's something that they want to look at. And you don't necessarily have to sell them something to provide that value to them. You can provide them more information. You can provide them links to different things on the internet. You can provide them informational videos or interviews or just a whole number of things that relate to your product that keep people thinking about your product or what you have to offer, but not necessarily forcing a sales pitch on them where they feel like they're compelled to either buy it or they feel guilty because they haven't bought it. And that's not a place where you want to put the customer in. You want to make them comfortable. You want to make them want to be able to have your product, and you want to have them come back again and again. Because if you've got that repeat business, then you're building a stable revenue stream that's going to keep you in business for the long haul instead of being another statistic where you're a business that fails within 5 years.
So what you're saying is basically give them information, education, fulfill their desire for the yearning for information first, because in that process you're building a trust connection with them as being obviously the knowledge expert, right? So when somebody's looking for information on a particular topic, you first give them some freebies, some information in order to quench their thirst for information, and then through that obviously you raise more topics that might lead them towards the sale. Is that kind of what you're saying, as opposed to just getting out there and hitting them hard with this is what you need kind of scenario?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying. And then you've got to also do it from a genuine perspective. The way I like to say it is when you look at I like to tell the story of a radio DJ. You get a great voice that's on the radio. But when you meet that person in person, it's a different voice. They have this acting voice. And so when you actually meet them, it's not that persona that you're expecting, because you hear what's on the radio and that's their one persona, but then when you meet them in person, it's not really them. And that's what we try so hard to do when we're trying to sell something to somebody, is we're trying to be something that we're not. We're trying to be this gung-ho marketer, salesperson type of person that is going to be able to convert all these people into this great business, and we're going to have everybody love our fantastic product, and we're just going to go gung-ho in it and make sure that we've put out our greatest sales pitch ever. And for most of us, that's not who we are. For most of us, we are the type of, for me personally, I'm the type of guy who likes to have dinner and we chat and we talk, and we'll talk about a little business, we'll talk about our day, and we'll talk about what we like to do for fun. And that's what you see in the content that I write. You see a lot of stories. You see a little bit of sales content, sure, because you're trying to sell a product, but you're letting the product sell itself through the words that you're using.
You know, it's interesting because you're aligned with somebody we interviewed in the past called Ben Zolden. He set up actually a training group called Storytellers, and that's exactly what he talks about. He talks about, now not to say in the written word, but in his case in the relational sense, it's all about storytelling and building trust through that sort of conversational style. So yeah, basically taking that to the written word and creating a story around a solution maybe, or a problem, or what have you. Sounds like a good tactic. Okay, so now let's just go a little bit into maybe a little bit more of the nitty gritty. So, is there too much content that you put on a website or on an email campaign? Is there such a thing as too much, and what's just enough?
There's absolutely too much. When you look at some of the sales pages that you see on the internet today, and we've all kind of stumbled across them, where you have to literally go through 7 or 8 or more pages of content as you're scrolling through it, trying to find exactly what it is that you want to see from that website. Eventually you give up because you just can't find what it is that you want. I mean, there's testimonials that get put into the content. There's different pictures, there's different little additions that try to convince you. There's statistics, there's studies, there's all this great stuff that is supposed to convert you into becoming a customer, but ultimately you just can't find what you want because there's so much content. And so what you got to do is you've got to be able to condense that, and you've got to be able to put it into such a context that the average person is going to not only want to read it, but they're going to be able to find exactly what it is that they want within that content. Now, is every person going to be able to find what they want? No, I mean, that's an unreasonable expectation. But you can also structure your content in such a way so that it makes it easy for anyone to be able to read it, comprehend it, and know if they want it or not. Because ultimately, you can't convince somebody to make a sale. They have to make the choice themselves. You simply have to put the choice out there in such a way that it makes them want your product more than what your competitor is offering. And so if you can do that in a clear and concise way that's, in such a way that establishes trust and kind of tells a story to it, but also works on convincing the customer in such a way that when they make a choice, they want to choose yours, that's what you got to do. Now, sometimes you've got to expand that, and sometimes you have to put in, a decent sized sales pitch to get everything that you need in there. But 9 times out of 10, you can do it in less than 500 words.
So essentially, keep it short, keep it sweet. I imagine using headlines and subheadlines that draw people to paragraphs that get to the point, I imagine. I mean, I've seen your writing and I know how you do it, so I'm kind of I'm in the know there. But what's the most effective way to actually increase that conversion rate?
Well, that's a great place where you can, as a sales pitch, be able to put in a lot of the SEO concepts when it comes to content, while also putting it into a sales pitch. Your headings are a great way to be able to put in keywords, as long as those headings make sense. You can't just fill stuff with different keywords and expect people to want to read it. Now, will a search engine be able to recognize it with all of those keywords and maybe boost your ranking? Sure, I've seen that happen. But on the same token, when you do that, your conversion rates actually go down because you're putting in content that doesn't make sense. And so when a customer or a targeted visitor sees that content that doesn't make sense, they just leave because it's a way of not treating the customer with respect. And so you've got to be able to weave the two concepts together. You put in the keywords, you put in the concepts that you want to be able to market towards the search engines, but you also put in the keywords and the sales copy that you want to be able to market towards your targeted visitor to make them want to become a customer. And if you can successfully do that, not only are you going to potentially rank better within the search engine, but you're also going to potentially have higher conversion rates because you've become effective on not one front, but two fronts.
This is great stuff. I mean, it's kind of that sort of secret sauce that most people don't really understand why websites get found, but they often should. They lose focus a lot of times on actually communicating properly with the client and the potential client. So great stuff. It's one we could have you on for another 15, 20 minutes here, but unfortunately we don't have enough time. Thank you very much, Graham, for joining us today and giving us a chance to understand the way an established writer would basically approach online content. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate the time, mate.
Well, and before we go, I just want to give Graham a good plug here because, first of all, check out his book. He wrote a book called Changing Seasons, or A Changing Season, excuse me. And you can also check out his website at thepomelo.com if you want more information about his offerings. And obviously, you can check him out on Fiverr if you're looking for a gig or two. Check it out there as well. So thank you all for joining us today. We're glad you've joined us once again on another great guest that we have here on BizDev Weekly. Thanks for joining, and see you again real soon.